We return to South America. Ecuador's President Daniel Noboa has officially been sworn in following his re-election for another 4-year term this year. Noboa was sworn in alongside his Vice President, Maria Jose Pinto, and their terms will run until the May of 2029. In a ceremony at the National Assembly on Saturday, he was sworn in by the body's president, Niels Olsen Piet. Olsen placed a presidential sash over Noboa's shoulders as they raised their joint hands in the middle of the celebrations. Noboa pledged in his inauguration speech to continue to tackle corruption, drug trafficking and violent crime. He also swore to implement reforms and said he would lay a solid foundation for job creation and investment by working with Ecuador's private sector. The ceremony in the capital, Quito, was attended by U.S. Health Secretary Robert Kennedy, Colombia's President Gustavo Petro, Peruvian President Dina Boluarte, and many other international guests and delegates. We stay in the region. Colombia's Navy has made one of its biggest drug busts this year. Over 6 metric tons of cocaine chloral hydrate have been seized in a major operation on the country's western coast. The 2-day mission took place in Tumaco, near the border with Ecuador. Rear Admiral Camilo Mauricio Gutierrez says the drugs are worth over $300 million on the international market. Half of the haul came from a semi-submersible vessel intercepted offshore. 3 Ecuadorian nationals were on board. All of them have been detained. The rest of the cocaine was found hidden underground, buried to avoid detection. The Colombian Navy says this operation strikes a major blow to the transnational drug trafficking networks in the region. Let's listen in to what the commander of Pacific Naval Force had to say on the issue.
Con estas dos operaciones, la Armada Nacional logró evitar que ingresaran a las arcas de los grupos armados organizados más de $300 millones y evitamos también que circularan en las diferentes calles del mundo más de 15 millones. En la primera operación se realizó en tierra en zona rural de Tumaco, donde se incautaron 3.260 kilogramos de clorhidrato de cocaína. Y la segunda operación se realizó en el mar a 80 millas náuticas del litoral de Tumaco, donde incautamos 3.000 kilogramos de clorhidrato de cocaína.
We now move over to the United States, where Americans on Sunday will mark 5 years since George Floyd was killed by a U.S. police officer. Floyd's death on March the 25th, 2020, launched the Black Lives Matter movement into a global force against police violence and systemic inequality. At George Floyd Square in Minneapolis, the intersection where the 46-year-old died, a memorial event took place, featuring protest art, music, and moments of silence. Floyd's aunt, Angela Harrison, urged people to keep pushing for reform despite a growing backlash. Around 50 people gathered at the memorial to lay yellow roses and reflect. Let's now turn to Europe, where French Prime Minister Francois Bayrou has said that he would re-examine a planned reform after taxi drivers threatened to intensify protests. Cabbies warned of blocking Paris airports and rolling garrots on Sunday in response to new rules on patient transport fees. For many French taxi drivers, transporting patients is a key income source. They say the new nationwide pricing rules set to start in October would slash their earnings. Bayrou met with taxi federations on Saturday and said talks would continue to examine in the coming weeks. They have ideas for making savings, he added earlier in the day. The National Taxi Federation demanded that the government immediately withdraw the reform and return to the negotiating table. By Saturday afternoon, around 1,200 taxis were parked near the Transport Ministry in Paris to demonstrate. Drivers were also repeated long-standing concerns about ride-hailing apps like Uber and Bolt, calling them unfair competition. The protests mark a rising standoff between the government and drivers over reforms seen as threatening the taxi industry. We stay in Europe. Britain's southwestern railways returned to public ownership on Sunday, marking the Labour government's first step in renationalising the country's rail operators. The move fulfills a core promise by Prime Minister Keir Starmer, whose party returned to power last July after 14 years of opposition. Today is a watershed moment, said Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander, calling it the start of railways serving passengers and not profits. The South Western Railway is the first private operator to be brought under public control, though 4 others were previously taken over due to poor performance. The government passed a law in November allowing operators to be taken over when the contracts expire, or earlier if mismanaged, to be run by Great British Railways. Alexander warned change would take time. Public ownership isn't a silver bullet, she said, but it ends 30 years of fragmentation. Critics say British railway passengers face high prices, delays and service confusion. Nearly 4% of services were cancelled in the past year. Rail unions welcome the move, saying privatisation didn't and doesn't work, said union leader Mick Whelan. 2 more operators will be renationalised by late 2025, with all private contracts ending by 2027. The government expects to save £150 million a year. In Scotland and Wales, rail operators are already state-owned under devolved transport policy. We now jump across the pond where dissident Iranian director Jafar Panahi urged Iranians to put their differences aside and work for freedom as he accepted an award for Best Film in Cannes on Saturday. His film, It Was Just an Accident, tells the tale of 5 ordinary Iranians confronted with a man they believed tortured them in jail. Panahi, who was banned from making films in 2010, has been imprisoned twice and argued that cinema must be a space for free expression. He was in Cannes for the first time in 15 years, having seen a travel ban lifted on him in 2023. Here's what he said about Iranian cinema.
Le cinéma iranien a vécu beaucoup de choses pour arriver là.
اون کسانی که در شرایط سخت‌تر از من کار کردند
Tous mes collègues qui ont travaillé dans les situations même plus difficiles que moi.
هنوز سینما ایران رو تو جهان کسی نمیشناخت.
À l'époque, on ne connaissait pas le cinéma iranien dans le monde.
ولی در واقع پایه‌های اصلی این سینما رو ریختن.
Mais ils ont mis la fondation du cinéma iranien.
تا اینکه به این نقطه رسیده.
Pour qu'on arrive là aujourd'hui.
حالا دوستان جوان، دوستانی که دارن راه اونها رو پیش گرفتن.
Et maintenant, les amis plus jeunes, les amis qui ont continué leur chemin.
بدونن که هیچ قدرتی نمیتونه جلوشون رو بگیره.
Il faut qu'ils sachent qu'aucun pouvoir peut leur arrêter ce chemin.
چون شما توان دارید در هر شرایط سخت راه حل پیدا کنید و کار خودتون رو بکنید.
Parce que vous avez ce pouvoir de trouver une solution dans toutes les conditions compliquées et difficiles.
This comes as a power substation and an electricity pylon were vandalised overnight in the region around France's Cannes, which has been hit by a major blackout on the final day of its film festival. The substation was targeted by a suspected arson attack, while the legs of a pylon carrying a high voltage line were cut in the Veluve near Lobbay, according to prosecutors and local officials. So the electricity was being restored gradually to the region, and some reports shared that traffic lights were working again near the Cannes Film Festival headquarters. To the world of sport now, where Novak Jovovich has done it again, claiming his 100th tour level title after a thrilling final at the Geneva Open. The world number 6 fought back from a set down to beat Poland's Herbert Hurkacz in a 3-set battle. The win makes Jovovich just the third man in the Open era to hit the 100 title milestone, joining Jimmy Connors and Roger Federer. The 38-year-old Serbian is now the oldest champion in the Geneva Open's history. This is his first trophy since his gold medal win in Paris last year.
Incredible match, 7-6 in the third with obviously full stadium, beautiful atmosphere, so I'm just grateful to clinch the 100 here.
Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates.